If you were to ask me who God was, I would say that He is the Father in paradise, revealed through His living Word, who became known as Jesus Christ. If you were to ask me what God was, I would say He's eternally self-willed perfection. Eternally self-willed perfection. And in a way, this diagram is a simple way to understand that. In the previous video, I titled it The Secret of Celestial Mechanics. But I didn't outright tell you what the secret was. But I did tell you what it wasn't. The secret to celestial mechanics is not excessive force. What is the secret to celestial mechanics? The answer is not excessive force. What in the world does that mean? Well, it means a lot. It means a whole freaking lot. It means a whole lot about the universe. It means a whole lot about God. It means a whole lot about freedom. It means a whole lot about free will. It means a whole lot about this symbol that we're looking at right here. So, God is eternally self-willed perfection. And that self-willed perfection is not excessive force. Believe it or not. Regardless of how you see nature, regardless of how you see the world around you politically being manipulated with military force, and then their laws and everything has to be upheld through excessive force. Okay, that's not the secret to perfection. Now, when I say celestial mechanics, what does it mean to me? Well, it means something biological, it means something chemical, and it means something electrical. It has a trinity of factions of meaning. And it would mean how things that have mass are affected by gravity, and how to overcome certain frictions, and how to create momentum, and then how to travel from point A to point B through time-space efficiently, biologically, chemically, and electrically. It means understanding the efficiency of space and how space can be eternal and then still be eternally forever created. And this symbol can show it to you. So, if God is eternally perfect, but yet He gives free will within His creation, and then you believe that you're creating reality, but in all reality, you're manipulating the medium of creation, which is not reality, which is really matter that's molded into a form that's based upon an impression that's made. And then that impression is not permanent. Just like the footprints in the sand. just like any building ever built, just like any material thing you'll ever see. It's not permanent. Therefore, the impression of material things are neither permanent in the fabric of existence, but they do find existence for periods of time. But only are they eternal if they are perfect impressions. And the perfect impression is a perfect image of a mutual attraction of the likeness of God. So you couldn't fit your face into a contour of an image that you were not. If God is all perfect, therefore there would be a particular impression that you would have to make to meet a contour that is already ready to receive, that is pulling you inward. There's a contour. And the impression that you're hoping to make into time space is the impression of that image of perfection. It's almost like a lock and a key. Okay? That's where Jesus Christ said, He's the key. He will show you the way. He will show you the way to be the perfected image of God, but not God himself. And then the image of God is to love, mercy, compassion, and forgiveness. I promise you that. I promise you that. And that's the impression that you're trying to make into time space. And that is not excessive force. It can't be excessive force if you're already trying to match a contour that's already pre-existent in its perfection. But it can be excessive force if you are trying to impress into the fabric of the eternal I am an impression that it's not meant to receive, and that's imperfection. And that is what's taking place here. Okay? And we'll go back over that. But we're going to show you some really neat stuff here. So, the secret to celestial mechanics is not excessive force. Now, if you want to talk about it into a perspective with purely material things, traveling through time and space, in other words, outer space, in its most relative understanding. And then we would still be talking about celestial mechanics, as I said, overcoming gravity, creating momentum, and traveling from point A to point B efficiently. Okay, but then here becomes the problem. The way that they're doing it, they're using excessive force. Okay, and then to travel further distances, they have to create a greater excess of force, which creates a greater consumption of energy. Therefore, it's a positive and a negative, and then the negative almost cancels out the positive for space travel, and that's the problem of fuel. Okay, and this is where I said you can repel the future, but you cannot attract the past. And of course, we're talking about polarities here. These things will begin to make sense, hopefully, as we go further, if my mind can retain all this still, because I'm speaking directly right out of it. So, the secret to celestial mechanics is not excessive force. If there is a pre-existent image of perfection that represents the contour of perfection that's already installed into the fabric of creation, and then you yourself are to become in the likeness of Christ, which knows the perfection of the Father. Therefore, he represents the exact image of that contour that we are seeking eternally to match into the fabric of the existential I am of perfection. Does not ever mean we become that existential I am of perfection, but it does mean that we match the contour of its relative form identity of personality, manifest, prerogative. And you would almost equate that simply in your mind as your state. we're going into that eternally self-willed perfection. Be thou perfect even as I am. The perfection is to match the image of God, of which Jesus Christ is the representation of that exact image that can be achieved in relative fashion with your existence in form at this moment. So, if we were to take the mechanics and put it into the expression of the rocket, well then, I said that they're trying to create an inertia to overcome, or they're trying to create a momentum to overcome gravity. Now remember, gravity is the pre-existent energy that pulls all things ever inward and onward. And that gravity of God would be defined as mutual attraction. God is everything. Everything is made of God. Therefore, there is no opposition within the actuality of something as it is. There's only opposition of the observable reality of what is by the creature that has become manifest. But that which is manifest, separate from the creature identity, is already pre-existent within the self-willed identity of the Father himself. And that is the symbol that you see. So the space rocket, in perspective of their relative term of celestial mechanics, trying to overcome gravity and travel to point A and B in space efficiently, reveals that excessive force is not how it's done. Because then you have basically the combustible engine. Oh man, we had a time outage. We had a daggone audio outage, excuse me. And this is not the video for something like that to happen. Because I could never say this again the way that I just said it now. I could speak about it, but it won't come out exactly the same way. It'll be the same information, but I could just go about it in a whole different way. So hopefully it wasn't something that I didn't repeat. And if I'll go back and listen to it, and if it was something that you didn't hear that was important, I'll make a short video so you can hear it, because it's absolutely important. So there's types of celestial mechanics. I mean, you got to imagine there's a physical celestial mechanics, all right, that we talked about within perspectives of manifest, of electrical, chemical, and biological, okay? And then there is a celestial mechanics that has everything to do with the travel of the soul through mutual attraction, which is relative now to the projected image of yourself matching the receiving contour of the gravity affection, the mutual affection of the Father. Okay? So if you were to imagine, in a sense, a stretched out fabric and pressing a face into it, that would leave an impressed contour into the fabric. But what you need to realize is that it's not a face on this side of the fabric that has pressed itself into it that made that image. It's on the other side. And it didn't do it by pressing into the fabric with excessive force out to you. It did it by pulling from the other side, that's the gravity, of what you are perceiving as the material fabric, time-space, and then the contour is created by a pulling action, not a pushing action. This is the pushing action. Deuteronomy 33. It's a pulling, and that's attraction. So does it take more energy to attract or repel? Now remember, God's all about efficiency, and we need to talk about the efficiency of space as well, which is going to explain eternity, and it's going to explain how it can contain all people within it, forever, eternally so, and will always be relative to the requirement of its spatial existence. So, the Father, this gravity of the Father is the mutual attraction, which is not an opposite of attraction. It's a mutual attraction. You're the child of the Father. That's a mutual attraction. It's not an opposition of attraction. The mother or father is not in opposition to the well-being of the son or daughter. They are in mutual appreciation. They are in mutual cooperation. They are in a mutual affiliation in partnership for the benefit of the child. So too is the Father, forever, continually, and always. So if you can imagine the fabric of time-space in a sense at this point, imagine it stretched out between something like a tennis racket, a great ring, if you will. Just dealing with circles here, okay? And I'm not talking about the ring from the perspective of the shin ring. I'm talking about what the confusion is of what things like this have been turned into. But I'm taking you to the base root of it all. Now, if you were to stretch an elastic substance across that ring, imagine that, as I said, you almost in your mind have to imagine the face coming from our side pushing into it to make that impression of the face of the contour. But it's not. There's a match that takes place, and that's when Jesus Christ does it. He matches the contour. But the contour in the fabric is on the other side that pulls the shape in the fabric of the relative image of man in which he's evolved. And we just use the face. Just imagine the face right now. And then that contour of the face of man is in the perfection fabric. But it's not man himself, but it's the pulling of God in his mutual love and attraction for man, pulling him into the image in the perfection of God, which God is making the meeting point happen. He is pulling into a relative, doable, achievable, manifestable reality that you can achieve. And now that's why I said that's why you're imagining the shape of your face. But the shape of your face is really the relative contour of the impression, which is really the pulling of the gravity of God on the other side in what you would perceive as time-space. Jesus Christ matched that image, that contour, that impression, fit it, and in essence, that's what the key is. Jesus showed you how to do that. Okay? So, that's where it's not excessive force. It's not the pushing from the other side out towards you. It's the pulling from the other side in. Pulling in towards you. And that's the gravity. Now, the gravity is relative on all perspectives. Material, spiritual, philosophical, animate, inanimate, chemical, electrical, biological. All have relative gravities. All gravities are relative in one direction, and all gravities pull inward. All gravities pull inward into a body of mass. And I'm going to show you that light is mass. And it's going to reveal the efficiency of space. It will reveal eternity. It will reveal why excessive force is not making things perfect. It's only making things cruddy, more cruddy, more cruddy. So, let's take the rocket here a little bit. Okay, so the rocket wants to escape gravity, but in order for the rocket to escape gravity, it has to create a combustion. It has to create a force that's stronger than the relative force that holds it. All right, that represents a predeterminate condition. Okay? So now, what you would imagine with the rocket, now fire is used. The combustion engine. Okay, which is seriously outdated. right? That you can familiarize yourself with. Another audio outage. Talk about a rocket for a second here again. And the rocket's trying to overcome gravity. The gravity in itself is a physical manifest, but it's a physical manifest inspired by a spiritual projection. It's more like a permeated outer wave of an original inspiration of affection, mutual motion. Gravity. Now, it has its characters with the loving guidance of the parent that restrains the child until the child is mature enough to make decisions on its own that are correct in its environment. So gravity, in a large perspective, is like that to the entirety of mankind, till mankind has created a level of maturity, hopefully spiritual, not materially, then mankind is maintained by a very strong gravity. But always the gravities are always pulling inward from a mass. Gravity always pulls inward from a mass, and I want you to see that the largest mass out there with the greatest mutual attraction, not repelling, not force, not brute force, not excessive force, but mutual attractive force, which is the efficiency of celestial mechanics, and it's also the key for the efficiency of space, and you just don't understand this yet. So, the rocket, you have got to create a fire, you've got to create a combustion, which creates a consumption, which creates the necessary for more fuel, which now creates the necessary for more mass. More mass requires more force. So as I said, the positive is always canceled out by the negative. So you want to build a rocket that can travel a long distance, but then you got to put a lot of fuel on it, and it can't get off the ground because it takes so much fuel to burn. And then the whole thing with the excessive force now cancels out its ability to travel efficiently. So the key is not excessive force. The key is not in a combustion engine. The key is locked up in the understanding of light. Light without excessive heat. Light without excessive heat. You're seeing it here, but you don't understand yet. Light without excessive heat. Excessive heat represents excessive force, which represents friction, which represents, if it's done in the wrong way, fire, as you know, but in the sense of fire to the being, to the person, to the personality, which represents things like anger, wrath, vengeance, destruction. These would be destructive acts, consuming acts that are now relative to the rocket that must consume this much fuel to escape the gravity, okay, to escape the material constraint, all right? But as I'm trying to tell you that the gravity is not a material constraint, and as you'll see, the gravity is actually the way to release yourself from the material gravity. All right? And that's by mutual attraction. In a physical way, the spiritual attraction is mutual, always ever inward. But as I said, bodies suspended in space have mass. They all emit gravity dependent upon their size. The greatest the size, or the greatest the density, I should say, the greater the gravity. And then that gravity is pulling whatever object which is within its periphery inward. The larger the gravity grasp of the object, the greater the pull. The gravity grasp is always relative to your position to it. The closer you are, that's the gravity mass that pulls you in. But that pulling in you would now have to imagine spiritually like a vortex. It's pulling you ever inward. All right, first job it does is secure you on the spherical earth. And then it has a safety mechanism that keeps you bound to this earth until you develop, hopefully, a morality and a maturity about yourself when you attain this high material knowledge, so that you'll use it in the correct way. And then that's another reason for the time delay, in which you must create a certain amount of momentum, not just scientific, but almost moral, to reach a specific state of efficient space travel. Okay, and that's all built into the design system. So, if you can understand that the rocket is not working properly because it takes too much fuel, which is too much consumption to reach the state that it is. And then it's never able to travel far because it exhausts itself of fuel. So it can never have enough fuel. And then the more fuel it takes, the more energy it takes to escape the gravity grasp. So then the bigger it must become, the more mass, the more gravity holds it down. The more gravity holds it down. Okay, so you want to getting pulled over out there. So you don't want to use excessive force to get where you're going, to change the conditional environment. Okay, now there are relatives within excessive force that you would perceive within carving out the conditional environment, but the excessive force is not excessive if the force is correct. If the force is in the correct direction of that contour of the image of God in time-space, which is that eternally self-willed perfection. And that means anger, wrath, vengeance, deception, thievery, lying, killing, rape. All of these things that people do to overpower and control each other is not matching the contour. And all of those things have relatives within their perspective of working the environment. And then that's where it takes on the perspective of intent. And if the intent is to match the image of God, then that image of God would appear in the environment. And therefore everything would become beautiful. But as we see, it's become grotesque and ugly. And that's all by their pursuit of matching their image of God, which is excessive force, and which I said is this image right here. That's the bull man. And this is all this stuff that's going to come relative to it. Give me a second to train. Okay, so the things I'm telling you, you really gotta not take me lightly here, okay? Because you're gonna find out as I move forward. The things of truth are so expansive. This is why people never get them. They want something so quick, and if it's the truth, it's connected to everything. So you have to talk about everything if you want to always get the bigger truth. You're always talking about the entirety of everything contained that's relative to that truth, the experience of that truth. And we're explaining reality, we're explaining God, we're explaining the image of God, we're explaining the secret of celestial mechanics is not excessive force, and we're explaining the hyperrelativity of all that within all other things that show it working congruently. You know, cooperatively, not against each other in opposition, but in mutual attraction, mutual affection for the same goal, which is perfection. God is perfection. The goal of the creature is perfection within his existence, which is to match the contour of the perfection, which is the image of God, which has been provided as the mold. That contour that we are being pulled into, if you're seeking perfection, it's there. You know, is that gravity, that spiritual gravity. Now it's always pulling all things materially inward, but you're not material in the sense to where you're bound specifically to a gravity of a material sphere. Now, your spiritual gravity is bound to the contour of the impression of God that you have. You have an impression of God in your mind. Hopefully, the impression of your God is ultimate perfection. If it is, you recognize the contour of the ultimate perfection of God within the fabric of time-space. And then the impression of God that you have becomes the match for the relative contour of God that's provided as the image which Jesus Christ showed us, lived, and matched it. Matched it. And that is in essence the mirror that is not the reflective duality of the backwards. It's the perfect match of the forward motion through time-space, reaching the ever relative perfection of paradise that is contained at the central location of all things. Wow. That was a lot to say. That was a lot for my mind to equate and compute to you, but I got it. I got it. And I can show this further with the tennis racket and it will explain dimensional physics, okay? What I call qualitative physics, not quantitative physics, qualitative physics. So let's show you what we're looking at more or less right here, and this will kind of help it come together, and we'll talk about the light is mass thing here. God represents this central point right here. Now, automatically, we already know that this represents a central location of Lucifer. All right, the symbol with the circle and the dot, and it does represent a symbol of Lucifer. But remember, Lucifer came from heaven. Lucifer was a pre-existent being created by God, perfect in his ways. So to put a time scale on the existence of Lucifer before he rebelled is impossible for us to do in human terms. So what I'm saying is that this symbol is relative to the first source and center of all things, of which Lucifer is trying to become, as he says, I want to ascend my throne in the north. I want to be like God. Okay? So this symbol actually comes from the Urantia book, and you'll see it on the outer back of the book there, the binding of the book, and it shows some rings going outwards. Okay? But what you're seeing now is 7 successive levels of evolving super universe. 7 successive levels of super evolving universe. We're the 7th right here. Okay? This 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 1 is the central dot. This would be 2. This is 3. This is 4. This is 5. This is 6. I said it right, but I did it wrong. Okay, I should have wrote 1, 2, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All right, 7 is here. Okay, this we'll call the 8th. And that's what this line was going to be right here. This is a problem with a live video here. A small mistake in the counting of these circles here. This little permeating line right here represents an unfinished form of super universe, which we would perceive as the eighth. Okay? But it actually never is the eighth. It actually is never the eighth. It's going to represent the seventh, as the seventh expands into this expanse that you're seeing right here. Really sucks kind of that I messed that up when I counted it out, because I got a long video here and I don't want to have to do the video again. So we're right now at the last level of formed order and form, the seventh super evolving universe is where we are right now. There is another universe here, 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 and then this represents the central perfect universe, and then God represents the central perfect source of everything that you see permeated out. Everything that you see. So God is the central perfect being. The central perfect location is perfect. It's paradise. All beings within it are perfect. Then this first expanding super universe manifestation outward from this location is not perfect. They are evolutionary. As this is evolutionary, this is evolutionary, this is evolutionary, this is evolutionary. They are all striving towards perfection. Okay? Which is not this 8. As I said, it only represents what we perceive to be as the 8. It only represents as what we perceive to be as the 8. But as I said, we expand into this space which makes the 7th. So in all reality, there's always going to be 7 levels of successive universe attainment. And I might be saying that wrong. I might be saying that wrong, guys. I'm trying to pull all this from memory here. It might be this. It might be this. Let me have to redraw this for a second. Central universe, all things perfect within. This will be number 1. This is number 2. That's number 3. That's number 4. That's number 5. Number 6. Number 7. Okay, that's it. Okay, that's it. Sorry. And then this would be the permeation, which is the next level of super universe existence. But it's not the 8th. Okay? In all reality, okay, it in a sense becomes the 7th, and then it becomes the 1st. This is where the last should be first and the first should be last. Alright? It's going to turn into another number 1, another number 2, another number 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. It's going to go all the way out again. Okay? And then what happens is this central location that's perfect, God at the center of it, and then all the first created perfect beings within it. This is the paradise location. As this 7th super universe level begins to reach an attainment level of perfection, then this level itself now forms itself, and then this now becomes the 1st, which is the 7th expanding into it. And then this circle here expands into this circle here. This 2 becomes a 1. This 3 becomes the 2. This 4 becomes the 3. This 5 becomes the 4. This 6 becomes the 5th. This 7. Now, we just had another audio outage. See what you do to me, Verizon, New World Order, whoever the hell you are. You guys have no idea what you're missing with all this excessive force trying to block the truth from the people. This isn't your truth. This is the truth of the entire world. This is the truth for all the people, no matter who they are, what racial stereotype, what color, what status, what money, what religion, what temple, what church, what club, what stamp, who they know, what judge they voted for, what politician they know here. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's for the people. It's life. It's relative. It's reality. If you breathe, this is yours. This is yours. And I can give so much more, and I'm not going to give so much more. And it takes time to give it. And I'm telling you, you just don't have no idea what's happening. You don't have no idea what's happening. I'm trying to help you see. So, as I said, now we got the 6th level. This becomes the 7th level, which now represents itself as the 1. Okay? And now this represents itself as the 7. Give me a second here. Give me a second here. $76. And then that 7, that's where I messed up. That's where I messed up, because I remember what I did that, guys. I traced that as a 1, and I traced it as a 7. What it should be, as I said, that this becomes the 1. If that's the 7th, that became the 1, and then this becomes the 7. 17. 17. Okay? That 1 becomes the 7th of this level pushed out. But it's not being pushed out, it's being pulled by a contour that I told you was on this side, creating a relative gravity. Alright? Now what I'm trying to show you here is a very incredibly complex reality equation that's going to link back up with light, and how you can continually put a never-ending amount of light into a closed construct, no matter what size the closed construct is. The head of a pin, you can continually pump light into the closed construct space parameters of the head of a pin eternally, and you can always get the light brighter. You can only do that if you don't use excessive force, which creates friction, which creates heat, which creates combustion, which creates consumption, which then creates the destruction of the receptacle receiving the light. And that's what's happening to these people. That's what's happening to these people. It's what's happening to the world. It's what's happening right here. And they think that they're doing all the right thing to get to this perfection, when in all actuality they are creating the consumption of themselves. And that's where they're going to be non-existent. Non-existent by their self-will determination, which is the rejection of perfection, which is the exact opposite of the contour of the original perfection that we're talking about. Okay? So what I'm trying to get my mind to do here is show you that now This was the one. Now this becomes the one. Imagine this whole space now being this original circle, to where that circle wouldn't be there. In other words, all of this would be the same space to this parameter. As I said, this would represent number one. That's it. Oh my gosh. That's it. I did it wrong. Okay. This is a live video, guys, and you're actually literally seeing me how you wait. You're actually literally seeing me. This might not be so bad at all for you guys to see me make a few mental mistakes here. This is what we're going to see happen. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Okay. This is the centrally perfect being. This is essentially perfect being and paradise. This represents the first super evolving universe that is not perfect, that surrounds the central location of paradise. That's number one. If this all now, in a sense, expands into this relative perfection, which has now been perfected by its self-will and mutual attraction pulled back into the contour. And then that happens now where this expands into it without any need for energy, because it's a mutual attraction. This expands into it by the self-will of the mutual attraction of the creature that is willfully going into the contour. And then once that happens, this can expand outward and claim another existence of perfected, expanded space. Okay? And then this is how eternity is going to ever expand and relative need towards the pilgrims of time-space that are ever traveling ever inward and onward to it. As each successive level reaches a level of stabilization out here, and then the next successive level of super universe begins to expand out, then we see back here at this level, simultaneously, one more level has been claimed within absolute perfection. Therefore, absolute perfection of paradise expands, but is not expanded because it's a mutual attraction of each other. It's not just an expansion. It's a mutual attraction of the energies, each going towards each other, pulled by the other, in a sense. The will of the creature recognizing the perfection of the creator, and therefore the creature doesn't resist the tidal pull of the perfection towards paradise, and then is able to match the contour image of the image of paradise, in a sense now acquiring the perfection status. And then as that takes place, the perfection status is acquired within this level of permeated super universe. So now this one becomes the one. And as this one is the centrally perfect universe. All things in it are perfect. Then this is the first super evolving universe. Okay, that's number one. Once this expands into that universe expansion, then we see that number two, as I said, turns into number one. And that's 21. That's 3 sevens. And then number three turns into number two. And then number four turns into number three. Okay, I got that right. Yeah, because if that was previously first central location, paradise, then number one, then number two, then number three, then number four, then number five, then number six, then number seven. Right. 7 super evolving universes. One central pattern location, of which the mutual attraction must be matched to reach the contour. Once the contour has been matched, then the absolute envelopment and the permeation of the eternally self-willed perfection has now permeated this level of time-space. And then now this turns into the central perfect location, which means now that's number one. That's right. So then we get 21, then we get 32, then we get 43, then we get 54, then we get 65, then we get 76. What would happen is now this one. This is expanded here, and this becomes the one. Or no, this becomes the perfect Paradise Father. Now this is the one. Okay? As another level of super universe has been stabilized. Okay? Then this would have to represent now 2. If it was 1, after 7, it turns into a 1. It repeats itself. Okay? It repeats itself. I might have added that 2 in there too soon. I might have needed to complete the process out, and then I come back, and then that's when I add it back in. And you're going to see an incredible mathematical equation develop, which I can begin to explain celestial mechanics with. And then I can begin to explain the efficiency of space, and then I can show you how to put the entirety of all mass and matter on the head of a pin. Alright, that sounds crazy. I've already done it with the Eternity Explained with the sheet of paper. Okay? But as I'm saying, the Spirit gives this to me simultaneously, and I'm actually giving it to you as it's being given to me. And I'm having to work out on paper what's in my mind. So chances are I'll redo this and then be able to map the equation out correctly, and then be able to show you the process of this permeation of perfection into the qualified creature that is now qualified to match the contour of the perfected image before it. Okay, and I got you messed up here. I probably got you messed up here. But I said some things that were so valuable in here in my mind for what the process is. I'll probably upload this video, and you guys might think I'm crazy. Well, go ahead and think I'm crazy. It doesn't matter. I know I'm not. And I know that the people that heard a few things in here that I was saying know that I'm not as well. And as you can begin to see how this is working out, you can kind of see where I'm going. Many of you could probably make up your charts right now and complete this process, as I'll probably stop the video and start the process over again here. But this is where I'm going to have to work it back out. I've gotten to this point where, because I'm on video doing it live, it's a little bit of stress on my mind, and I got this all curved out, so I'm going to probably do it on a bigger piece of paper and then come back. But hopefully we'll upload this video. I'm going to listen to it. I'm sorry it's an hour long, but it's just some tough stuff for my mind to relay. But it's the exact opposite of what you're seeing here with this excessive force. And you need to know. You need to know you need to know the paradigm, in a sense, that's almost resulted in 2 paradigms, and one is non-existent. One is not even anything relative to even be considered a paradigm to become acquainted with. It's non-existence is what it is. All this shit is non-existence, man. That's what it all is. Stay away from it. But this is the pattern of existence. This is the pattern of matching the contour of perfection, in which you are relative to. And the relativity is through mercy, compassion, forgiveness, caring, honesty. And it's not anger, wrath, vengeance, jealousy, murder. That's all the fire. That's all the consumption, which consumes the material source. So therefore, there's no vessel that's left that can show the perfection attainment, because it had to be destroyed to reach the attainment of perfection through the excessive force which is propelling it in that direction. So therefore there's never nothing left. There's never nothing left. If there's never nothing left, you don't got nothing to build off of. You don't got no experiences. This is why their reincarnation don't work. It's because they don't got none of their past experiences under control. They've never been reincarnated. It's reincarnation puts you going outward this way. What you're going to find out is the creation pattern existence goes outward. But what you do is you're being pulled ever inward. And then you're going to find out that this outward is actually an inward too, with the inverse of actions. And I show that to you with the stretched out material, pulling it one way and then pushing it the other way between that ring of the tennis racket. And you create a vortex. Push it one way, push it one way. Or pulling it the other way. There's a push and the pull, which you think are oppositions, which now you've equated as good and evil, and which are not. But there is a real evil. Okay? So, if this guy was pushing here and he wasn't using excessive force, and he was doing this all for good, like I said, to move something off of something to set somebody free, then why is he pushing off the tops of two people's heads here that's destroying and killing them? And he is basing it off of the predeterminate condition of their genetic disposition. And then therefore he thinks he's got the right to kill. This is the pushing off of. And then in the relativity now, he has described them as being divergent, dualistic, everything that he already is, that he's showing you, but he's claiming for everybody else. So this is evil. If you're pushing on top of somebody's head and you're hurting and you're killing them and you're walking all over them, trampling them to get what you want, that's evil. So even though you might think you're doing the good thing by pushing over here, you're doing the wrong thing over here by pushing over here. And then guess what you're doing? You're pushing yourself apart. So the efficient thing to do would be to pull the thing towards you, and that's pulling this thing into the future. And as I said, that's the relativity of the contour that God does with the gravity. He doesn't push the things. And this is where Deuteronomy 33 will reveal to you the pushing, because they're pushing the people to the ends of the earth. That represents the excessive force. It represents the astronomical significance of the bull. It represents the disposition of the personality of the ancient Anunnaki who rebelled. That rebellion is excessive force against the divine way, against the divine contour, which is the image of God, which is the perfectly achievable, manifestable identity, personality, prerogative of love your neighbor as yourself. And if you can love your neighbor as yourself, in essence, the ultimate neighbor of who you're not fully acquainted into is God the Father. Because does he not dwell within you? Therefore, that's the ultimate neighbor. That's the ultimate neighbor. But when you reject the neighbor by other skin tones and other colors, guess what? God dwells with them also. Remember, each spherical body in time-space has an internal gravity pulling everything inward. Imagine each space body as a planet, moon, star, celestial sphere, all have an internal gravity based upon the mass. I'm going to tell you what the requirement for the mass is not based upon physical matter. It's based upon spiritually what matters out of the physical matter, and that's what the quality is, not the quantity. So you're thinking the quantity equals the mass. Spiritual mass is quality. Spiritual mass is quality. The quality is what creates the spiritual gravity, which you're being pulled to. And then other people are being pulled by a purely material mass, which is quantity, that then they're being pulled to. And then that's why, in essence, they fracture themselves over and over and over again and create this divergency of quantities that is devoid of quality. And then this is where you get all these clones and then these worker bees and all this other bullshit and all this repetitive bullshit. Okay? That is stagnant of the quality of life, which creates the unique ability to find an individual identity while at the same time seeking the perfect contour of the original image of the perfected being. And it took a long time for me to get to that point to say all that. I wish I could have said that in the beginning, but it's not like that. I have to still work through this. So I'm going to listen to the video. And This is where you can see that I'm not perfect, and this is where you can see how I do what I do. And this is where you can see what I will have said now is going to mean a whole lot later. And I don't know if you can grasp it. Let me close the video out. We're going to have an audio outage here coming. 1 second. Okay. 1 second. I'm going to wait like a full minute because I don't know when the audio goes out after an hour. Just give me a second. Give me a second. Are going to show us a continual unique quality of each dimensional perspective as it supersedes the next, which will build upon the original unique identity of the previous universe before it, but does never make a clone of it, always makes a continual unique creation based upon the inspired information from the previous, which is ever growing towards a continual level of progression of perfection, which is reflective of this original level of perfection here. That's what these numbers will tell you. They're going to reveal in a numerical form a unique originality, because the numbers themselves, you will see, will always change as they grow higher, but they will always build upon the relativity of the dimensional quality that they have replicated. But they don't replicate them in clone fashion. They only replicate the unique quality, and then that unique quality is then transferred as a new higher number, which will be relative now to a higher reflection or a higher density of dimensional quality, which then can have a quantity. But the quantity no longer equates itself as a material identity, it equates itself as a spiritual personality. All right? So to close the video out, to kind of give you this thing about light here. Now remember, we're supposed to be, people would call themselves, some people would call themselves a light being now. You're not a light being now, okay? You have the potential to become progressively more qualified and less quantified. And then the quantified is less material. You become less material, you're becoming more spiritual. And that more spiritual is what you would equate in the simplest forms of calling it a light body. This is what's going to give us the efficiency of space. To where as you see each one of these expanded circles get seemingly bigger to you, okay? And I'm going to tell you, in all reality, they're not getting bigger like you think they are, okay? That's what the tennis racket and the elastic stretched out over top of it will show you. Okay, it's not. And I'm going to tell you, it's making space out of space. It's making infinity from, in a sense, what we would have to call nothing. Okay, but that nothing is not nothing in itself. It's the eternally self-willed perfection, which is ever eternally able to produce more and more and more and more, because it's qualified, not quantified. Okay, and the quantity is not the material matter. The quantity of the quality is not the material matter. Okay, so people have switched it around. They're looking at this matter as the quality. It's not. It's not. So if we're to take we've got all these light beings out here. All right, we've got all these, each level of successive universe has people that live and die in it, okay? And they hear the call, okay? God is calling them towards paradise, and I said that gravity of paradise is pulling everything inward. It works within an order to where, as the souls get pulled in, the permeation of the existence of this circle grows equally to achieve the individuals coming from here to receive it. But notice this looks smaller to you. Wow, I wonder if Einstein went through all this crap. So this seems really small to you, but it's only small because what you're seeing is the absolute efficiency of space being achieved by the exact opposite of excessive force, which is mutual attraction, which requires no excessive force to mutually attract. You get me? So as you would see these circles go out, you would now begin to see this circle now get bigger. But it will always be the exact same relative size in the beginning that it was as you saw the original circle. Because remember, it never escapes 7 levels, and it always keeps growing into itself, and it always stays at that 7th level because the next level of permeation of perfection has been achieved. And then those that live and die here, as they travel through these successive levels inward, eventually reach that perfection, that perfected contour of being, which is provided eternally, existentially, by the self-will of God, of which you are not. It is your will to be more like him. That's your task. You know? It's your will to be more like him so that you can make this journey towards him. And he's already provided the way. So as you see, these circles aren't going to keep going on to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of circles out, because of the circle here expands. I'd say expand, but it's not, because this is actually expanding this way. But when you say expanding, you're saying, Kurt, when something expands, it gets bigger. No, when something expands, it gets smaller. It gets smaller. And you think that I don't know what I'm talking about when I say that. No, I know exactly what I'm talking about. You think about, let's think about this. Watch what happens. I'm going to take a funnel. Okay, it's going to look like the hourglass, and this ain't no joke. It's supposed to look like the hourglass. Okay? This is where I'm telling you that things that expand are getting smaller. And you've got to remember your perception here. If you take something, it's traveling inward, and I'm saying you're being pulled ever inward, and you're going smaller and smaller to achieve an efficiency of space, which is a dematerialization of being. You're lessening the mass. You're lessening the matter. You're lessening the friction. And that's what giving the new name and the new body is. You're going to be successfully given new bodies, not reincarnated into another being, but you're going to be reflected into a higher projection of the being that you're already becoming. And this is what destroys karma. This is what destroys all that stuff of reincarnation. And I can show you the science that shows you the progressive evolution of carnation, of incarnation, not reincarnation. Reincarnation is not progressive. You're regressing. But incarnation is progressive, and you incarnate into a higher resonance of spiritual quality and a lesser resonance of material density. Okay, and then this funnel is the key here. And in this funnel, you would imagine is a tennis racket right here with the elastic stuff. But you just have to wait for a second how that comes together, because what you're going to see is this take place. And I'm telling you, yeah, that has a connection with Freemasonry. And it has a connection with the infinite spirit. It has a connection. It's this, as I'm telling you, these symbols here that we're seeing being used have lost their original meaning. And then because the beings in which they come from were a part of the original state of the unrebelled heaven, they understand the energy mechanics. They understand the celestial mechanics. They understand the material energy transmutation within the celestial mechanics as a material being is progressively refined into a spiritual being. Okay? And then this is why you see Freemasonry has that symbol, which is about that refinement of material being into a spiritual being. But as I said, the inverse of actions and the looking of the mirror has duped them from seeing it. But yet they still have particular of these symbols that they hold. But I just have to explain this to you another time. But you need to see it without that first, because I'm telling you, we're talking about dimensional quality here. So imagine the hourglass. Okay? As you're going inward, I'm telling you, in essence, you're getting progressively smaller. Okay, this is where the efficiency of space. Things go inward forever, not outward forever. And that's where I told you these rings just don't keep going out, out, out to hundreds and hundreds. Nope, it always equates itself at the seventh. And then this would always absorb the expansion of this is absorbed right here to make the next level. So existence of itself, and you find the existence within that self as you seek to qualify yourself within that existence to match the image in the contour of that image, which then allows you to be there by your own self will of existence, which is changing your identity of form, your identity of philosophy, your identity of mind, your identity of spirit into the image of the perfection of God, which is self-willed. And then he gives you that self-will to do it to that, to match now the contour of himself in which he has provided. And then I told you, it's in this equation here. It's in this equation here. So as things go smaller forever, imagine it coming down a funnel. It's a larger thing here. It's a smaller thing here. It's a smaller thing here. It's a smaller thing here. Okay? This is where the efficiency of space is going to come in. As things go inward forever, you get a condensation, if you will. You get a condensing. Okay? You get a density, but it's a density not of the material thing. It's a density of the spiritual thing. The density of the material thing is always the heaviest out here at this seventh level, which we stopped here, but then we showed you how it forms a new level of the one here. The highest density is always out here, and each successive level of relative density gets lighter and lighter to spiritual form until it reaches this place here, in which more spirit form can be contained within now because of the absence of the density of the material matter. And now we're dealing with the spiritual matter. Okay? You see that? Can you see where my mind is trying to get you guys to see what the spirit, the high art of mutual attraction that the spirit has given me the understanding of, which is the exact opposite of their supposed secret of celestial mechanics, which is excessive force. Because remember, their celestial mechanics talks about making people gods and spirits, which this ain't the way to do it. Or not spirits, but making people gods in the flesh. This ain't the way to do it. This is the way to do it. This is the way to do it right here. This is the numerology, but it's not numerology. It's just it shows you the relative quantitative value of the observer's observable environment, okay? But it's not the numerology where it's some freaking form of magic. It just shows you the transmutation between the material expansion and then the spiritual contraction, which is the gravity pull of mutual attraction towards the center of perfection of all things. In that is that thing that people can't track in their mind, and which I told you the elastic stretched over the tennis racket will do, which you'll see this thing takes place right here, which will then create an inverse of action by one finger pushing into the direction of the racket, pushing in, and then as he pulls back in the other direction, creates this shape here. And as I said, represents this funnel here with this Broadway thing, if you will. And then there's the narrow path. Okay? I just have to save that for another time. When we get to the racket part, if I can show it to you. It doesn't have to be a tennis racket. I'm going to try to look for, maybe I'll make it out of wood, a central circle ring, and then suspend something in it and show you that. And then it'll show you that there's two sides. That's what I'm talking about, the other side. There's two sides of this fabric, and they change places as you push them from one side to the other. But they're not changing place. It's only dependent upon the force applied, which makes the perception of the place, the exchange of the matter, the perception of the exchange of the matter take place. I don't know if you understand that. But back to this. When things get smaller, and this is the paradox here, when things get smaller, or should I say when things get more efficient, less material, and more spiritually dense, when things get smaller, guess what? Everything around it gets larger. Everything around it gets larger. That's called the efficiency of space. Okay? And it's where the efficiency of energy and fuel and consumption are canceled out. And where you don't need a vast amount of space to contain space. Matter of fact, you're fine with all the space you've already got. Contain all the space that it ever was and ever will be. Even a billion times smaller than the head of a pin. A trillion times. As many times as small the head of the pin as you want to time it, the largest number that they can give you. You can still put everything that ever will be continually into the smallest containment, which is the efficiency of space. And we can show you that with light. So just get it in your mind right now that when an object itself becomes more qualified in the density of its spiritual quality, that means it's becoming more dense of spiritual quality. In a sense, that's the contraction away from the material. As I said, here's the material out here. The contraction away from the material is the gravity of the mutual attraction being pulled back into the quality of the spirit, away from the mere quantity of the material, which you see as it's equating itself out as material quantity, and as this number will grow. But as I said, the number is also reflective of the spiritual quality. But because you're going to see, because these numbers, I'm telling you, watch what happens is this thing will exceed and then pull these numbers back in. Oh man, you have no idea. You have no idea. You might even be able to do a computer model on what I just said after this. And if you do, golly, man, you realize where all this is coming from. It's coming from Jesus Christ. It's coming from Jesus Christ. This ain't coming out the Urantia book. 7 super levels of evolving universe are, and of course this symbol, but everything that I know about it now is being strictly inspired by the Spirit. None of this is, nothing I do is comes from anywhere else other than the Spirit. It comes from right out this mind, right here. All inspired by the Spirit. As I said, I was quickened. I was visited. I was visited by what you would call angels, but what I know of as midwayers. And it's not the rebel midwayers. And you need to read the Urantia to understand. Okay? But, so, now let's talk about light for a second. Okay? This is probably one of the most interesting videos I've ever done, even though I don't know if any of you guys can understand what I'm saying. And it sucks that I kind of messed this up, but I think it's good that you can see this is a real process here I do. This is a real thing I can do. Light is light has mass, and mass is matter. So therefore light is matter. Physical light is matter. Matter has mass. Okay? Mass has gravity, which, as I said, represents mutual attraction. Okay? So, if you were to take, and this is where I'll explain to you about the combustion thing with the rocket, it should all come together here. about the about limiting the excess heat, which is anger, wrath, vengeance, violence, in only creating the relative heat, which is love, warmth, compassion. Relative heat to the experience of the conditional environment and the requirement of it to be thou perfect, even as he is. Okay? So, if we were to take, light, let's start with physical light first. Okay? Physical light emits heat, and the greater the physical light, the greater the heat, and then you would think the sun. And then the closer you get to the sun, guess what? You get burned up. So that can't be what the Father is, okay? Because you get burned up, you get pulled to him, you get burned up, and that's not what you want to happen, okay? But there is a projection of the dissolving of the physicalities that is in perspective of the individual being pulled towards the spirit, and then the physicalities are devolving or divested, and then you would see that as you becoming progressively to a higher state of spiritual being. So the material sun is not the spiritual sun, okay? And it's not a vortex and a doorway there too, but it does have the relative mechanics that is relative to all of the perspectual doorways of mutual attraction, of relative gravities pulling everything inward and onward. So if we were going to take, let's say that we took a room that's the size of a head of a pin. Well, first of all, let's think this. First of all, let's take a very strong light and hold a piece of paper in front of it. Okay? A very strong light and hold a piece of paper in front of it. Let's put some sort of register on this paper that can register weight. Okay? And so now we've got the paper suspended, and we're registering the weight, we're registering vibration, we're registering resonance, we're registering mass, we're registering matter. Okay? Mass has weight, matter has weight, and they're detectable. So what our high-tech machine would do is, if I was to not have a light on and then turn the light on, the machine would register a change in weight on the paper. Guaranteed fact. I don't know if they know this or not. I mean, I'm sure they probably do. Because even a big spotlight, you can feel it when it hits you. If you were to walk in front of a spotlight, now you feel it with the heat, but the heat is revealing the actuality of the matter, because the matter itself is producing the heat based upon the friction. The friction is itself that is a product of the excessive force, which is now a product of the material mass itself coming in contact with other material mass. And then that material mass creates a relative friction, which then is transferred as heat, which is a marker for energy being transmutated. Okay? Energy being transmutated. But the key is that the more energy you transmutate in a purely material form, the more excessive heat that you create. So all these people trying to be gods, cursing, killing, ready to destroy everybody, all these genetic doctrines, they're only creating more excessive heat, and then that's why that proves why they believe they have to have this all-consuming fire to do it, which now represents, in the mathematical form, the consumption of themselves. Literally consuming themselves. Not going into the relativity of perfection, but they're going now into the relativity of the imperfection of consumption. And then you've got a spiritual fire, and then you've got a material fire. Okay, the spiritual fire is light without heat, but heat that's relative. The heat that's relative, as I say, can be defined as warmth, compassion, mercy, forgiveness, caring. That's a light that's warm. But if you were to take a physical light, a purely physical light, and continually pump it into a room, continually, you would find out that even in a room the size of a head of a pin, that you could keep on pumping light in there continually, and the light itself would continue to grow. But the problem with physical light is the heat would grow with it. The heat would grow with it. And then eventually that heat would combust the vessel that you're trying to contain all that light in. And that's not what's happening here. Okay? So what you're going to find out is that to create this paradise of perfection, which is not the all-consuming fire, but the relative mutual attraction of the warmth of love. And this is why if you're angry, wrathful, and vengeful, you can't even make it anywhere in here towards this contour because it won't accept you. It won't accept you. And that's why it's your own will that is rejecting the truth of God. It's your own will that denies your own eternal existence by not willing yourself to match the contour of the perfectly existential one. And this is where it's all your self-will to do this. So what happens is what they're trying to do is they are trying to create a level of illumination that's based upon wrath, vengeance, domination, and excessive force. That eventually creates the combustion of the vessel that's seeking and claiming illumination. Because the more material light that you put in, the greater heat you increase, till eventually that heat exceeds the vessel's capacity to contain it, and it burns it up. But if you divest the material friction from the spiritual being that has been refined and smooth, you reduce the friction, therefore you reduce the heat. You reduce the heat, you have a more refined form of light that is less material, more spiritual. Less material light is less hot and more warm. A pleasant warm. Okay? Less material light is a warmth of love. Less material light equals more spiritual light. Less material light equals more spiritual light. Material light, philosophically and academically, is the illumination of only the material thing as the construct of the spiritual goal, in which it's not. It's only the vehicle in which the spiritual goal can be achieved. So I will explain this further. So if you were to take now spiritual beings that have been refined of their materiality and their animal instincts, now they are becoming progressively more devoid of anger, vengeance, wrath. Now they're becoming, it's a more refined form of light, which is the soul form of the identity of the body that your personality is trying to attune itself to. And then therefore, more and more spiritual light can continually be added to the central location of paradise. And as more souls are permeated